Right. So today I'm talking to Tommie Kelly. Tommie, how are
How
you?
are you? How are
I'm
you?
very
Pretty
good.
good.
I'm pleased to see you again. It's been a bit of a while.
It has been a while. It's been a while. I was trying to work out when it was. It's years, I assume, at this point, is it? It's definitely, was it,
Yeah, probably
yeah,
is.
mid-lockdown, probably? Something like that, maybe.
Yeah, I think
Time's got so weird over the last while. That is very
time, time and magic and all that stuff.
yeah,
Everything.
yeah.
Yeah. All yeah, etc. etc. Um, we're going to sort of chat about Stuart Wilde today because we've sort of had a chat before about him, and we were going to do something. So this is it. Uh,
This is the thing we said we would do. Here we
this
are.
Yes, but I was listening to your interview on Spirit Box,
Yeah,
and you mentioned about Stuart.
yeah,
So,
yeah.
for those who don't know about Stuart Wilde, would you like to
Well, Stuart,
launch the boat?
yeah, it's he's an interesting guy, and the thing that I mentioned on Spirit Box Dara was that he was the biggest news in the world. He was huge, like the
Yeah,
top guy. Like Wayne Dyer introduces him on one of his audio tapes. You know what I mean? And as like in a way of like someone I've known for many lives, my best friend, all of this kind of stuff. And then I don't know when exactly it happened, but it happened where he just kind of there was no like huge big scandal or anything, at least not that I'm aware of. I know that later those kind of stories come out, but he just kind of didn't people just seem to forget about him, and he was still producing stuff. He was still like he wrote the whole way. Like he's dead 10 years, or whatever it is, and he's still writing books. There's two books come out this year, um, or last year, whenever it was recently, anyway. But so I don't really know what it is, and it's not. I suppose the only thing it could be, in a sense, was there a large debt of the new age scene, but I don't know. What's your
that
thoughts?
might
What do you
that
think he
might
meant?
have been that might have been part of it. But you are right because I remember now I didn't see this article, but I've I'm pretty sure I've seen the photograph that went with this article that was in some I don't know what magazine it would have been, like Kindred Spirit or some one of those types.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
But there was a picture of him. I don't know if it was Wayne Dyer, could have been, but it was Richard Bandler as well.
Okay.
The
Yeah.
three of them with long black coats on,
Right. Okay. And
right?
hoods.
Yeah, yeah, a bit sort of Matrixy before the Matrix, if you see what I mean.
Right. Yes. Yeah. Yeah.
So he was certainly up there with everyone, and again, up there with Richard Bandler, who's obviously not from the NLP sort of side of things, has never lost any of his sort of
Certainly hasn't. No.
notoriety. Um, so yeah, it is very odd. And what's strange is that I actually only personally learned about Stuart Wilde because of my wife at the time. She was my girlfriend at the time, but she knew Stuart right back from when he was in his heyday.
Right.
And the point was he was so incredibly well connected. And it's almost like there were lots and lots of people, like we were saying about Wayne Dyer, right? Lots of people who knew Stuart Wilde and lots of people who, knew him personally. Stuart and sort of worked with people. And again, all these people have almost like sort of he's been airbrushed out.
Hmm. Like the
But
Stalin photos.
yeah,
Yeah.
it's
Yeah.
very, very strange. So what was your connection with Stuart? Because you met him, didn't you?
I did. I met him in Glastonbury. He actually talks about it in after what's it on the Journey Beyond Enlightenment, which is now a book. That's one of the books that's in that they've obviously just taken transcription of it and turned it into the book, which is fair because that's what Infinite Self is anyway as well. Works well as a book. As a he actually, for me, I think he's probably a better speaker than a writer, and and he called himself a speaker rather than a writer anyway, mostly.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
So yeah, I met him. He thought it was what year was this? It was the year that The Sixth Sense came out, whatever that, because it was the when I had arrived. Was over with a girlfriend at the time and her mother, and they were big into they were druids and they were going over to like the Goddess Festival in Glastonbury. That when we were over there for about 10 days. So I was under there's no Stuart Wilde connection with this at all, And then when I arrived, and there's a big poster in the window of one of the bookshops at the square, and it was like Stuart Wilde is appearing tomorrow night. So I was like, oh my god, that's insane. And his new book came out today, and I was like, okay, fair, that's interesting. So I went down to the town hall, and of course, it's completely sold out. And he says, there's no chance, you're not getting it. You're not getting in. And I went, well, that's not much of a synchronicity. If it ends up, I don't get in. He says, what you can do if you want is you can come down and you can sit in the kitchen and you can wait and see if people have bought tickets don't turn up, but you're not getting in. But you can do that if you want. I goes, sure, I'll do that. And so that night I went down, and there was, I'd say, 4, 5, 6 of us waiting in this kind of like a kitcheny, tabley area, and every one of us got in. So that was interesting. And the first guy, he was doing some like crystal bowl sound therapy stuff, and it was really, really good. Really set the kind of the mood. It's a nice kind of atmosphere in that place, anyway. And then there was kind of some vocal chanting going on, where you'd just chant the vocals of your name, or you'd the vowels of your name, and everyone was doing different, but it all kind of came together. It was really, really nice. Subsequently, after that, there was people giving out about it because that said that's witchcraft. I said, this is Glastonbury. What if they giving out about witchcraft? It's certainly not witchcraft. Anyway, it's a well, I suppose everything's witchcraft if you want it to be. And then he came on, and it was you could tell the atmosphere immediately changed, absolutely, in a negative sense. And it does you could almost hear, but not quite, audible gasps, and people instantly disapproving, and there was like this air of almost tension, I would say, like as if the kind of thing of everyone sitting around having a great night, and then your drunk uncle walks in the room and spoils the entire atmosphere. And he was drunk, and he was a lot around that time. He was showing up drunk, but this is kind of after his coming out of favor. So if it had happened around this time, at least you could point to it and go, right, well, he was self-destructing a wee bit or whatever was going on. So, but it was. So he currently did his kind of his lecture, but he's very kind of snarky. I thought he was funny. I was enjoying it. Giving out about people. With there's a guy with a pyramid on his head. That annoyed Stuart no end. And then he did
in the audience.
What's that in the audience? Yeah, some guy. Yeah, and but he kept he kept trying to tell a story from one of the Arthurian legends, or whatever, and he would start the same 2 sentences at the beginning, and then go off on a tangent and come back to it. And so he did also that. He hits through the kind of the whiteboard or the thing with the top of his head and proves that you're bulling through and it doesn't hurt, whatever. But poor chap, he did it and went straight into a wall behind it, so that it was bound to have hurt. But he kind of came out of it, whatever. But there was one moment that really struck me on it, and it was one of those kind of very strange instances that I find it very hard to describe, and no one would believe, or not necessarily no one would believe it. It's like, if it had been like an Eastern guru mystic, and you're sitting in the audience and this happens, you would call it transference or transmission. That kind of where you get a glimpse of the awakened nature of the teacher or something like that. So it's like that kind of a transmission. But it was certainly something that he recognized something had happened. And what it was is it was in the middle of conversation, and I just kind of zoned out, or so I don't even know how it started. And I was looking directly at his face, and his face all started changing into different people's faces, but like very physically. I don't mean in my mind's eye. I mean like it was out there, like I could see it, as if the light was changing around him. And it went on for, I don't know, like 20 seconds, something like that. It was like about animals and all, this kind of thing, whatever. And then he kind of, at the end of it, he took in a breath and he went, a moment of peace. And I was like, he recognized that something had happened there as well. And I thought that was very interesting. Shortly afterwards, people started shouting up, telling him to get off and get on with it, or the whole thing. And he's kind of stopped. He was only meant to do an hour. and he was, it was over an hour. It was for a crop circle weekend.
Oh,
Well,
okay.
the team, and like Colin Wilson was the next night and stuff like that. So, but I'm not really sure. Like, I mean, tangentially, Stuart Wilde has something to do with crop circles, but it wouldn't be the first thing that would come to mind. But he didn't
No.
talk about crop circles anyway. And then at the end, there was a whole kind of load of people just rushing out, very annoyed and wanting to make sure that everyone knew they were annoyed. And the opposite direction of about a handful of people, maybe 10 people going towards Stuart Wilde. And I was kind of standing somewhere in the middle going, do I go up? What do, what? Because you don't want to be a sycophant, you don't want to be annoying, you don't want to be doing any of these things. And then a woman behind me just says, come on, and pushed me up. Um, and he then said, people were trying to give him letters and stuff like that. He says, I can't take letters, I just can't. And I assume because it's never going to be something good, or whatever. But he said we'd meet over in the pub across the road. I can't remember what it was called. I did at one point. It was the famous pub at the square there.
Yeah, yeah.
And so there was kind of a group of like 12 disciples kind of hanging around. And we were in this pub for a while. But pubs in the UK are so different from Ireland, and it just kind of caught me off guard in that they kind of say, we shut at 11:30 and do. It's like in Ireland, it's kind of we shut kind of around 12:30, 2 o'clock. Well, somewhere between there, you have a bit of a leeway. But so we're only in for about, I'd say, maybe half an hour, 40 minutes. But there was an old guy. He's a cool old guy. Like he knew stuff. He was sitting beside Stuart, and he was giving it to him. It was Parsifal. It was the story he was trying to tell.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
He told the story because he was so sick of Stuart saying the first 4 lines of the story and then going off on a tangent. And Stuart was saying, "Don't you die because you'll probably take me." Which energetically, he was like, he was man. It was funny, but it was very strange. There was a very kind of strange atmosphere, and a lot because I was very excited to get, like it's one of the biggest things in my life, Stuart Wilde. One of the biggest influences, like meeting, I don't know, David Bowie or something, or Paul McCartney, something like that, something equivalent. But he had two kind of women that were kind of, I don't know, as minders or something that he had with him. And one of that, he told one of them to sort me out. And so I was directly in front of him, like across the table, and she sat on the kind of seat beside me, or on my seat, on like the armrest, put her hand on top of me, whatever she was trying to do, push down my energy or something. And she whispered in my ear, and she said, "Death is the easy bit. It's the living that's the hard bit." I was going, all right, well, I know that, but it's whatever it was had to be said at the time. And yeah, so then we got kicked out of the pub at whatever closing time was, and then we were hanging around the tower or the whatever it is in the square, that monument thing,
Yeah, yeah.
till about, I don't know, 2 or 3 in the morning, just talking, chatting, and he read everyone, he went around everyone, and he talked an awful lot about this notion of men who give out grey sperm, and it was like this dark energy that was coming out of them, and it was more than just, I think he meant when it was, in the sex act, there was this kind of a almost ghoulish stuff. That was not well before, but it was before he really got into the morph stuff and the ghouls, and that the ludicrous stuff near the end where he's saying that demons can get in through your arse and all this stuff that's in some of the later books. But it was you could see he was already touching on the darkness stuff at that point or whatever it was. And yeah, so he did a couple of etheric exercises. He had a suitcase of crystals that he usually he would bring them out or whatever. And then he came to me, and he was talking really, really low, and I think he was doing it on purpose, because he would talk really, really low, and someone wouldn't understand him. He'd go, "Are you deaf?" But it happened a number of times that it felt like he was, it was some sort of thing. And one of the guys go, "Yeah, I am a bit, actually." And he went, "All right, sorry." Just all these little kind of thoughts. But in the end, he had his arm around one guy, and for a long time, and he said to him, "Oh, you've chosen a really, really hard life this time." He was reading all the stuff and nailing it, like all of it. Like there was no,
Yeah.
not oh, you've had a hard life. He was like going, "You're a nurse," like this thing, your dad is a CUNT, whatever, you know, like nailing people. And he said to me, he asked my name, and he says, "Are you Irish?" And I goes, I am, yeah." And he just kind of looked at me like for forever, and he held out his hand. No, the guy he was holding on to, he was kind of sitting, so the guy was sitting in front of him, kind of facing me, the two of them facing me. He held my hand, and then Stuart goes, "You're going to be a master of something equivalent to not the exact, or you will be a master." Somebody says, "You have a bit more sperm to give out." He was a bit on the run with the roll with the sperm stuff. So that was like, I was 22 possibly, and to be told that your greatest spiritual hero thinks that, you know, yeah, it's lovely. I was like, don't get fucking carried away with yourself there either. You know what I mean? Like, you can very go into chosen one territory or egomania or whatever. But it was just, given that he had said some nasty things to people around us, that it was nice that it was nice for my ego not to be told that, well, you're an arsehole. You need to sort yourself out. Yeah,
that's right. Because he could be, from what I experienced, it could be devastatingly abrupt.
Yeah. No, and I'm like rude to the point of rude. Like, but he wasn't. I don't think he was doing it to necessarily being deliberately.
I don't think so.
Alice, you know, I think he's going, why would I not say this? That's what it is. You know, that's the thing. And I don't care if you'd like me saying it or not. But it's like, that's red. It's not blue. It's red. And if it annoys you that I'm saying it's red, that's on you. He smoked all my fags as well. I've spoken at the time, and he none with him. He chain smoked for about 3 hours, like literally chain smoked.
Yeah.
And yeah, he had was definitely a bottle of wine somewhere at some point. I don't know if that was earlier or whatever. And then he kind of he went away for a piss in the street and came back, and then very slowly, I think I'd gone at this stage with him, because I remember the guy telling me the next day, I don't really have a recollection, but they got into the car and they very, very slowly drove down the street away into the distance. And that was the end of that. The next day I was talking to people who were at it, who were less than pleased about the whole thing. And one of them, was a very strange thing. Glastonbury's such a strange place. I was talking to one of the women who was around the circle at the monument thing, and I was going, "Well, what do you think was going on last night?" She's just kind of looking at me. I was going, you know, what did you think? And she goes, "Oh, I'm trying to tell you energetically first." And I was going, "Yeah, I don't get that." Just tell me what it is.
Yeah.
And another one who really didn't like it. She thought she didn't. She was just at the lecture. She wasn't at the actual gathering of the 12 apostles afterwards. And she's going, "Yeah, no, there was really bad energy. I really disliked it. I found it, you know, really unpleasant." And I can understand if you've certain energy yourself and you're up against that. Like, in some ways, he was a different guy that night than he is in, you know, the audios, where he's, you know, the charismatic, funny, you know, in charge, you know, like bigger than life, all of these things, you know, the kind of almost, I don't know, jester, but also the king. There's a regal thing, all that stuff. But he was, I don't know, he was more kind of down and dirty street magician, you know, type of thing, like you know, something a bit more real, I suspect. I don't know.
He was sort of like, I'm just, what's the Tibetan mystic? What's his name? I can't think of the guy's name, but Kumli.
Okay.
I can't think of the full name. Anyway, it doesn't matter. But the stories of this guy, he would do outrageous things. You know, like chase demons out of a building by sticking his dick through the door, that type of thing. You know?
Yeah.
And that sort of crazy wisdom stuff.
Yeah. Exactly, like whatever, that guy.
Yeah, that's the type of thing. And of course, that I've just done a sort of hippie festival down in Sussex. There's some talks, and of course, you see a lot of that down there where you get the sort of holier than thou. It's awful to say this, but you know what I mean.
Yeah.
Easily offended by stuff that doesn't quite go with their sensibilities of things.
And I think it's not wanting to look at the darkness, in that it's seeing that everything as just, light, happy, live, love, prosper, which is like, that's the main fault of the new age, right? There's no darkness in it. There's absolutely darkness, and what they replaced darkness was with victim blaming, which is interesting because that's pretty dark.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think the interesting thing with this, because obviously the whole chaos magic thing. I've just been reading the KLF, John Hicks.
What about
a fabulous book.
Yeah.
And in fact, it was because of your little review that I've been a book that I thought I've got to read that, and just never got to getting it. And as soon as I saw your little review that you did on your Facebook channel, I thought, oh God, I ordered it.
Right.
And,
yeah.
Fantastic book. And what's interesting is that the whole chaos thing of where you sort of think, well, what's reality anyway? What is it? It's no good sort of going, oh, we're just going to go for the light stuff. It's like, it's just a mess. But within that, how things sort of, this sort of like, synchronicity or Alan Moore's sort of idea space or whatever, when you think, well, this is extraordinary ecosystem. It's just like being out in a forest, or whatever, where this is eating that and you're doing this.
That's it exactly.
But that's exactly what goes on in any space, whether it's liminal or physical. And I think what's interesting is that, when you get somebody like Stuart in that situation, where he goes in and he sort of blows the doors off of everything, a lot of people cannot cope with that because they want everything to be very ordered and full of light, nobody being upset and all the rest of it. But, that's not how things are.
No,
it's just bloody chaos, really.
Yeah. But that's also not to excuse Stuart equally of it. It's not. I don't. He wasn't making a kind of a point of doing that. That was his point. He turned up drunk. That is because he was unprofessional, not because he was a trickster entity, even though he is to a large extent. But
well, he sort of is. That's the point.
Yeah.
But his the fact that obviously he had a problem with drink, a serious problem with drink, and everything else that went with it. And that's why when I was listening back to the interview I did with his sister Dee Dee, that sort of helped me remember a lot of the incidents that, because I didn't know him for very long, and Susan knew him a lot longer than I did. But her first meeting with Stuart Wilde, he was drunk.
Right. What kind of era is that?
That was very much in the heyday when he had the first book out, which was a self-published book, which was on his was it White Dove? I think it was White Dove. Yeah. But it was like a self-published book.
Tolmac, whatever. Tolmac. Camelot.
Yeah. And it didn't even really have a title as such. It just had this picture of this sort of Taoist sort of character and a little child.
Oh, is this Miracles? Is that like that?
I think it was even before Miracles.
Right, okay.
Because I don't even know what it was actually titled.
Okay.
It was, anyway, but it might have become that.
Right, yeah.
But anyway, he was doing a talk behind a department store in, I think it was Oxford Street or somewhere. Anyway, but again, he turned up and he was, then had a skinful by the sound of things, and he upset a lot of people. So it's very, very similar situation. So I don't know whether that was just something that he did a lot, or it just happened to be the occasion that you saw him. And
there is even the story that he talks about how he got onto the spiritual path and how he describes it and how his sister described it. It's slightly different, but it more revealing in the way she talks about it. For people who don't know, when he was about 27 or something, he gave up everything, walked away from all the high life, and into the spiritual future. But she's kind of more said, well, he kind of fucked up a bit. Like he was drinking too much, everything was going mad. He was like in debt. It wasn't this kind of I walked away from an idyllic capitalist honeymoon or something like that. It was like things were falling apart. Which I mean is fair, you know. It's you know, it's probably unlikely that you're going to walk away from something when if it's pristine and perfect or whatever. There needs to be some cracks. But it is interesting even that his kind of his origin story involves, you know, again trickery, possibly drunkenness, you know, or at least going to the extremes. And even the spiritual journey itself is a man definitely going to the extremes of things, you know.
Yeah, I think reading between the two stories, his sister's story and his story, I think what was going on was he obviously had a knack of making money. There's no two ways about it. The guy was a great entrepreneur. So before he got into writing the books and all the rest of it, he had a couple of really successful businesses that made him really well off, right? But he always had this thing of throwing everything in, just stopping and, you know, getting rid of everything and starting again. And he did that a number of occasions. And I think that was the first one where, you know, he had a flat in where it was, Chelsea probably, I think it was, King's Row or something. And he tells this story about posting the key
into the letterbox,
away. Yeah. But one of the things that isn't sort of pointed out, which he talks about, is the fact that he spent a lot of time at the College of Psychic Studies in London, studying mediumship and stuff like that. But then he went off with this guy called Marshall Lever, who was this sort of medium character. And he did a lot of work for him. But then it sort of seems like he sort of took over, weirdly.
Yeah.
And that's how it seems that he got, I think he went with Marshall Lever to America. So he obviously then picked up a lot of a following to do with that. Now, no, I've never heard of Marshall Lever before.
No, I've only heard of him since retrospectively through Stuart Wilde. Some of that stuff has come out. You can get it now on the audio stuff.
Yeah.
Where he talks, and I mean, I mean, you wouldn't get away with it now. He talks to a character called Old Chinese. Like, you're not doing that now. Yeah.
It is, isn't it?
Yeah, and but there's some of that stuff.
Stuart had that thing about the sort of Taoist stuff, right? And especially at the end, because he did a series of books. I think it was called The Plum Robe or something like that.
Yeah.
With this idea
that's his last book, isn't it?
Yeah, I think it was, but I don't know what else he was doing at the time, because that wasn't really. It wasn't published as what it sort of was, but
it's an ebook, isn't it? I don't think it's
an ebook. Yeah, it was a book.
It probably came out of the mailing list stuff he was doing. You know that
I think
the Redeemers Club or whatever it was.
Yeah, and I mean, yeah, there were sort of interesting stories, but it
wasn't like by the end of his life that he had no money, but not according to Didi, because he says he was about to buy a new house and stuff like that.
Oh, he had money.
Yeah, but just some of the stuff he was doing at the end, like selling pens that would charge water and like really dubious kind of cowboy stuff, you know, like or like
now
stuff that you kind of go, this
I was there with the light pens. I know that story. These pens were being used for, I think they were being used for some, were they dentistry or something? I don't know.
Oh, like for the UV for your whitening your teeth type thing, that stuff, was it?
It was something like that. And that might not be quite right. But people were doing stuff with these pens to do with water. Now, the interesting thing, I can tell you a story about this. Stuart did a talk in Amsterdam, and we went over to see him do this because it was going to be filmed.
Okay.
In fact, it was filmed. I don't know whatever happened to the film. So we were in this big hall in this hotel somewhere in Amsterdam, and Stuart really sort of changed. He became this really humorous, very affable chap, right? And I was watching it, and the way he was sort of moving around, it was like he was in his absolutely in his element. Although we knew that he was actually quite concerned about this because it was being filmed and all the rest of it. And he did this thing with a jug of water, and it was pretty amazing, I must say, the effect that this had. So it's sort of slightly similar to your experience of just watching him and him change. So there was, I don't know how many people there were in this room, 200 people probably. So it was still pulling a crowd, you know, it was a fair old crowd. And he was funny, and he wasn't putting anybody's noses out of joint or all the rest of it. And he did, so he got this jug of water and he put it on a table in front of him. And he said, right, I want everybody to just sort of relax, and you've got to look at this jug of water, and I want you to feel the energy coming up through your feet as you're seeing, and then and then I want you to project that energy out into the jug of water, and shut your eyes and just be aware of what you see.
Okay.
Anyway, I had the most extraordinary experience, which was like, well, I suppose it was sort of like being on something or other, because it was so clear, and it was like a dream in a waking state. And so the basis of this was, it starts off, and then I was walking down this pathway, and there was this archway. And as I looked up into the archway, there were, these bricks were sort of set, and they all had little, what I would call now sigils, but I didn't realize it was that then. They were like little glyphs, little symbols, and some of them were missing around this archway. And as I walked through this archway, I felt this, like I don't know quite how this happened, but it was almost like I got my arms pinned back, like I was on this sort of cross. But then I started to spin round, right? So is this just like a dream? Spin round, and I was going up. And then I sort of arrived at this sort of place, like a garden. And there were all these sort of old characters in this garden, like you sort of think, oh, this looks like looks like Socrates or whatever,
Yeah.
What was fascinating about this was there are lots of things that happened to me later that I could go, well, that was like that.
Right.
It was an archway that looked like the the tarot card of was it the Nine of
Cups?
Yeah, with the archway and whatever. It was exactly like that. And of course, these little symbols were like, what I would later go, well, that was a sigil.
Yeah.
And then there was bits missing where that you sort of, when you get things like, I don't know, the Enochian book, where it's like, well, obviously, bits have been missed out of that.
Yeah.
Quite makes sense. So you've got all these sort of strange little coded things. You sort of go, yeah, that makes sense now. In retrospect, at the time, it made no sense to me at all. And this sort of thing of the spinning round and going up, that's like one of these things that, I've come across with different things where, energy that comes up and you make it spin.
Yeah.
So there was something definitely in that. The way that sort of, and he had the ability to make those situations happen. Now, obviously, everybody else had different experiences.
Oh, yeah.
But
did most people have an experience, though?
Sorry?
Did most people have some sort of experience, though?
Yeah, some people did. Yeah. Not everyone, but some people. And it wasn't, it wasn't necessarily that, I don't know, because I've done things before, but this was sort of different somehow, because it was in a hall with a load of people. It wasn't like you were in a small space and the lights were down or anything like that, because it was proper lighting because they were filming it.
Sure. Yeah.
And you think, well, there was definitely something that he was able to really get people to move something in themselves. And I'd seen him do things like that with other people.
Yeah, like
Yeah,
my thing, just to
it's
go back
curious.
to being beside him, whatever, eating no matter what, the drunkenness, the rudeness, all that kind of stuff. He, by far, is the most impressive spiritual aura of a person I've ever in real life
Yes.
encountered. Like whatever you make of it, that was certainly there, and it was like you're not seeing it, or feeling it, or whatever exactly it
Yeah.
is. And I've kind of, like, I mean, I've met plenty of spiritual people, but like there was like, so in that way he's the real deal, even if it, you know, it comes with a large helping of darkness or trickstery or whatever way you want to look at it. But it's like, even being in his presence, you could see people were having, people were changed. There's kind of, it's that kind of thing of like sitting at the foot of the master, that that kind of
Yeah, I get that.
there
I
is,
would say that.
something. Yeah.
See, because the other thing is, now this is why I think this is important that people revisit Stuart, is that some of the books, like Affirmations, they are brilliant.
Yeah.
And they're probably as significant as anything. Well, this is a bit of a sweeping statement, but of all the books that you could get, it's amongst them. There are things that are usable, that within those, ways of thinking about things that you can do. It's not even put forward as magic, if you sort of mean.
Oh, certainly. So I don't think he even uses the word ever in his books.
No, he didn't.
No.
But he used to associate himself quite a lot with. He certainly knew a lot about Crowley.
Right.
Definitely knew a lot about Crowley. But he would not associate himself with that. Not not that I've heard him
Yeah.
do.
Yeah, it's like he definitely talks about magic without ever using the word. Just gonna brighten up, like, think about that. Yeah, because I mean, I did a thing a couple of years ago on, oh God knows how long, many years ago now, on the website. It was about Stuart Wilde and about how his some of his, like, his turbo thought ideas, and that whole thing of getting people to turn around and look at you, or the having to stick out in front of you when you're in a park, whatever. They're all classic chaos magic stuff. Like, it's
Yeah.
if that's in, he's talking about chaos magic. I'm not even sure he even would have heard the term chaos magic, probably, but it's not where he's coming from. But all of those things, that getting people to turn around and look at you, that's something that is interesting, because it's definitely something you need to practice. Because I got really ridiculously good at that, and I can't do it now, just because I don't do it anymore. But I was doing it an awful lot, like going to shopping centres or walking down the street or whatever. And the process, for people to know, it's a bit nasty, to be fair, is that you visualize yourself right behind the person as close as you can, breathing on their neck, and then licking their neck. That's the suggestion.
Yeah.
Yeah. And the turn, like, I remember one time saying I could do it, and whoever was just going, yeah, no, you can't, no, that's ridiculous, and then doing it. I was that kind of confident that I could do it, and then I tried it, I don't know, a couple of years ago, and it's not working, not at all. It's just, so I think there's an element of practice involved in that.
Yes.
Same with the other one is this is from the Force. He talks about all of this. No, it's the quickening. So the miracle is the first, which I don't know. The miracles is essentially the law of attraction, the secret, whatever. That's just it. Very short book. Then you have the Force, the quickening, affirmations, and then the trick the money is having some. That's the quintet, isn't that, as he called it. And so in the quickening, he talks about being in a park, a public place, getting into your zone, visualizing like a rope or a stick coming out in front of you and getting people to trip over it. I wasn't quite as good at that, but I certainly got some effect. And then the turbo thought, you get into the grey area of manipulation there, but it's certainly something that can work. I also like this one of being able to walk through a shopping centre or down the street and have no one see you. But I was recently reading the biography of also known Spare, by Phil Baker, and he was talking about this great scene, and we were talking about they're at some sort of restaurant or whatever, and they're just weird guy going around pretending no one can see him. And someone asked the waiter, "So what's that about?" "Oh, that's just Alistair Crowley thinking no one can see him. He's just invisible." It happens all the time. Everyone just ignores him. That's just whether that's true or not. I've decided it is true. That's just such
I think that's actually pretty good.
yeah.
They're sort of in a
So
strange. He
yeah,
wasn't. Nobody wanted to see him. So yeah.
yeah.
That's hilarious. Because
so,
again,
go on.
Yes,
Sorry. Yeah.
no, I was just going to say you were saying, about seeing Stuart and sort of thinking there's something definitely there is something about this guy.
Yeah.
Picking up from that, it makes you think. Well, maybe that's the sort of thing that people like Crowley had that made them so, and maybe people like Blavatsky as well.
Well, it's a charisma thing as well. You often see it an awful lot. You'll notice it with like very famous actors or rock stars. They have this thing. There's something, and whatever that is, and you can see it. You can see it straight away. And some people don't have, and, like even famous people. So it's not that it's just something about being famous. It's some sort of aura. And I talk a lot about it with my wife, and I go, "He has it," and she go, "Yeah, he has it." And and we always agreed. If ever kind of a case where I go, "She has it," and go, "No." It's like you just recognize it instantly, whatever it is, and it's more than just like a learned charisma or confidence or composure or whatever the thing. There's something else. And you can see people who are quite famous and very confident, very speak very well, very articulate, all of these things, and you can go, they just don't have it. It's just not there, whatever that elusive quality is. And it goes to show in the case of Stuart Wilde that it doesn't necessarily have to become pristine. It can certainly come gruff too. And I think an awful lot of kind of even the more like Zen masters have that kind of rough and ready approach to it.
So that makes because I'm quite intrigued by what that is, because the first time I actually met Stuart, I was in Brazil.
Okay.
As you do. And it was because out of the blue, Susan, my wife, got this email from Stuart, and it was like, "You really need to come and do this thing." And it was an ayahuasca ceremony, and this is before, obviously people knew about it. It wasn't the big thing, right? It wasn't something that anybody really knew about unless you were absolutely in the know. And the point that he was making was, whatever you think you know, forget it. Just turn up and do this, because it will be So we travel out, because I didn't even know what it was. I had no idea. And I was really sort of going out because Susan wanted to go. And I thought, okay, so not only do I meet Stuart, I have a couple of very strange synchronicity things happen when I'm going out there. It turns out that, so I'm in Brazil, and when the people gather, there's this guy sitting opposite me, and I just happened to say to this guy, where'd you come from? Because he always comes from the UK. And he said his name, and I said, where'd you come from? He said, "I was born in Plaistow in London." He said, "But I used to live in Crayford, which was not far from where I lived as a teenager."
Right.
And I happened to say to him, "Do you know, there's this guy called Figgy was his nickname. He was a drummer, really brilliant drummer. And I was in a band with him. I said, 'Do you know Figgy?' And he went, 'Oh my God.' And he went, 'You play guitar for him?' And I'm just thinking, hang on a minute. We're literally the other side of the world.
Yeah.
And this guy, I've never actually met this guy for some reason. So there was all these weirds, and that wasn't just the only thing, but there was that.
Yeah.
And then of course we meet the shaman who's going to do the ceremony. And again, you talk about people with charisma. I mean, this was like, oh my God, who is this? Because that was just something else. So there is something palpable about certain types of people. I'm not saying that all shamans are like that, because probably not. But
Oh,
this guy was a guy called Kahujali, and it was a Colombian guy. So there was Stuart, and there was this Kahujali chap, and he had a couple of people working as sort of understudies. Who there was a woman, and she was amazing. And this guy's son, Kahujali's son, took one, and he was only 7
wow.
for the
Wow.
ceremony, and it was like being in Midsummer Night's Dream. Literally, was utterly mind-boggling, because it was in the middle of the day, and there was all this, you could see through people, and
Right. Yeah. Yeah.
utterly incredible. So Stuart, in that environment, that wasn't his sort of mainstay, because he wasn't really, he was partaking of the whole thing,
Mm.
but he wasn't organising it. He was doing
Oh,
it
he
maybe.
wasn't running it. This, he just says, "I'm doing this. Do you want to come with me?" Kind of a
Yeah,
thing.
it's like, I'm
Right.
doing it,
Yeah.
and we'll do a talk about the stuff or whatever. Um, but really, it was about these shaman, and the ayahuasca sort of ceremony and everything. And now, of course, obviously, a lot of people are familiar with that. But so Stuart was, but again, there was a lot of chaotic things happen. They lit a fire and somebody caught a light.
As you do.
And then on the middle ceremony, no, the last ceremony, we got a load of bandits turned up,
All right.
and absolutely armed to the teeth, AK-47s,
Was this
pistols, the lot.
the famous story where people are? Yeah, I've heard this story. Then
I was there. I was
yeah,
there.
right. Okay. Yeah.
So I was at, and the thing was, they weren't interested in anybody other than the Americans. They just
Oh,
wanted dollars.
right.
Um, and it was obviously a put up job, because they picked on one person who wasn't American, who brought a load of dollars in.
Right. 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 Okay. So then
So it was a put up job. But anyway, that was all part and parcel of the thing. But the interesting thing was that the shaman, the Kahujali, was actually negotiating with these gunmen,
right.
which was pretty amazing, because the only ones who weren't on ayahuasca were the gunmen.
That
And
sounds kind of a
there
gunman come
was about
in the middle of an ayahuasca trip. Not sure I'd be into that, yeah, to be honest.
it was an interesting dimension. Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. But the point was, really, what I was saying is that those characters that stand out as being something, just they've got something.
Mm.
It is very, very palpable, and I don't know what it is.
Yeah,
I
I
can't
don't know what it is.
it.
There is a kind of I wonder, rather than there is there a relation or correlation between that kind of energy and the ensuing turning to darkness stuff? In that it's kind of something, it's like, because that happens an awful lot. You see that a lot with gurus, with spiritual people, or whatever. Not necessarily your more teachers and more, the limelight people than, well, you do see it, like, I mean, chosen one fever is it happens a lot. But I wonder, is that part of the trajectory? Is you kind of burn out, that thing, and then it's like ghouls, demons, and darkness the whole way down. Because so many people I've been into have that arc where the Stuart Wilde arc, where it starts off light and love everyone, laughter, don't overcomplicate it, don't be serious. Like what the Stuart Wilde big thing of seriousness is the biggest crime. Very serious man by the end of his life, took things very seriously. And then, it moves into the UFO conspiracy, David Icke territory, and then you kind of, but it has that kind of, and I see it. Oh, I've seen it at least 5 or 6 times in people that. So maybe it's just a pattern I'm personally kind of allured by, but it's like that arc, whatever. What's your thoughts? Do you think, is there a connection between it, or is it just bad management? Is it ego run amok? What is it?
Maybe this is just an idea. Maybe the thing that gets you started, the way that you see the world, is not the same as everybody else. Because I don't think somebody like a Stuart, and certainly, obviously, listening back to the interview with Dee Dee, their upbringing was very bizarre, very odd, and you can see why he had that sort of, well, I said like a liminal existence where he could live in hotels.
Yeah.
Because that's what his childhood was like, because they'd go to, his parents were living in Ghana or wherever it was, but they were in public school in England, but they didn't have enough money for them to come back every holiday. So they'd got farmed off to different people, whoever would take them. And you think, well, that can't be good for a young child. So I think the thing is that a lot of people who are exceptional in that sort of world, who aren't necessarily grounded, let's face it, because that is one of those things, if you are very psychic, you've got to be able to really anchor yourself somehow. Maybe there's a part of that leads to this dealing with, everything being, you just get it all.
Yeah.
The dark as well, right? Maybe there's part of that right at the very beginning, before you even start that journey, where you're not completely grounded.
Yeah.
I don't think you can be. And I've often wondered with Stuart whether, somebody could say, well, he's definitely got whatever, put him on the spectrum somewhere, as you could with virtually anybody, I guess. But maybe there was something about, some sort of form of depression or something like that he had, that, he would self-medicate, maybe, I don't know. But I mean, he could just change. But when he was in those sort of moments where he was funny, I mean, he was absolutely hilarious.
Hilarious, like so tuned in.
Yeah. Totally. I mean, he did. He was writing a script for a film for a German comedian. I know that sounds a bit of an oxymoron, but this I think this guy. The guy's name was Kara. I should have researched this, because this guy was big in Germany. He's a Turkish descendant, right? Very funny, big name in Germany. But they were going to do this sort of film about a hotel. So it's a bit like Fawlty Towers, really. But it was a hotel in a ski resort. That was the idea. But it was also a little bit like, like the Budapest Hotel, but this was obviously well before that. Yeah. Where you've got these strange sort of mixtures of people, all sort of congregating in the place. And Stuart had written this script for it. When he read a chapter of this thing, and I'm not kidding, it was just so funny.
Right.
Got to that point where you couldn't actually breathe because you were laughing so much. Yeah. Because it would be one funny incident after another that built on the previous thing. It was utterly devastating. I mean, you think, my God, he was brilliant.
Who would have that?
I don't know. I'm just wondering, because he submitted it to this company that was supposed to be filming it, and they wanted him to rewrite it, and he refused to do it.
Right.
So somebody has got that script. I'll have to think about this and see if I can try and track down this guy. I mean, this comedian is terrible. I can't remember his name. He was doing sort of, like theatre type or large venues. This guy,
Right.
so it's sort of equivalent to a Jimmy Carr type.
Right. Okay. Yeah. Yeah. Okay.
Back in the day when they'd be doing these massive arenas and stuff, he was doing that. So he was a big name, and obviously he was following Stuart around. And he spent a lot of time. So he was over here when I met this guy. He was in Bath for a while with Stuart, because Stuart used to do this thing. We'd go to London, he'd stay at wherever it was, Browns or somewhere like that, and down in Bath he'd stay at the Royal Crescent Hotel. He had his own room.
All right. Okay.
So the point is that he obviously hadn't run out of money.
Yeah. 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 So I don't like the last. I suppose when he moved to Ireland for a lot of time, he seems that's a lot where it seems to kind of, I don't know, go a bit astray. And that round when the website first comes out, the Redeemers Club, all the predictions, none of them came true.
No,
Literally
I know.
none of them. Yeah.
No, I mean the only thing is that he did sort of warn of a tsunami, but he got the place wrong, and he got the dates slightly wrong.
Right. Okay.
But he certainly got the fact that there was going to be this catastrophic problem near the coast. But again, it's like a lot of things with prediction, isn't it? You can get the flavour of something. It's like you can get it. What's that thing about history? History doesn't repeat itself, but sometimes it rhymes.
Yes. 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 Yes.
And,
Yes.
and I think that is very true with things like predictions. You don't necessarily get it. You don't nail it, but you can see what it is that's coming through. If you,
Yeah.
a bit like,
yeah, your thing from earlier with the water thing. It's in retrospect, it makes perfect sense. But to try and look
absolutely,
at it as a predictive thing, good luck.
you
Yeah,
can't. Well,
it is.
it's like Jung's dream of the yellow mist.
Yes. Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
That he kept having this dream of this yellow mist sort of ravaging Europe, and in about, was it 1912 or 1913, and then of course you get the First World War and you get mustard gas.
Yeah.
There was no way that Jung could have worked out that was mustard gas.
No, and to make a prediction that there'll be some sort of weather incident or that something, you just get it completely wrong and you look foolish. But it's only in hindsight.
So that's a bit like when you see pictures of like Edwardian pictures of what they think it's going to be like in the future.
Yeah. Yeah.
You've got people on bicycles that you can pedal in the air.
No. Yeah.
You know what I mean? So what we do is we sort of take what we've got that we understand, and then we try to project it forward, when in actual fact it's never going to look like that.
Yeah. Well, this is interesting because that's kind of what is kind of some people's thoughts about like UFOs, is that's what it's doing. It's the same phenomena as, say, fairies.
Yes.
Only it's presenting in the technology of the day. That exactly. It's so that's when everything was rockets, and we were big into rockets, UFOs look like rockets. Then they moved into to discs, and then they moved into Tic Tacs, and then whatever the next thing. And we have the same kind of idea of how what we start thinking about what life is. What's the meaning of life? It echoes the technology of the time. Like, because now we have this kind of simulation, it's conscious fields, it's there's everything that looks, we can describe it like a computer. It's like storage, the cloud, all this, and it's like that's just where we are. Exactly. 100 years ago, it was the technology of the time.
And of course, the thing is that even any sort of creation myth does this as well. So if you go back, in fact, some of the early creation myths actually make much more sense, really, because they're based in something that's absolutely natural. The idea that it's an egg.
Yes, yeah.
These thing, there was an egg and it erupted or something. Because now, if you think about our creation myth as we have it at the moment, it's the Big Bang. Well, we got a nuclear bomb, right? So why a Big Bang, right? Whereas, of course, you think, well, perhaps none of this is absolutely true at all. This is just like everything else that we do. It's just going on in here somewhere. It's like we see something, we see a colour, but it's not really that. It's just how we are interpreting things. So when it comes to stuff like that, and I don't know how much of this that Stuart understood, because again, you think about the sort of the Gaul stuff. And when I knew him, he was deeply into all of this stuff. And I just thought it was a bit odd. and you'd have loads of people doing the warfare with the battling the ghouls, you know, and it was sort of strange, weird stuff. But in a way, you sort of think, well, okay, if there is something out there that we don't understand, that we will interpret in whatever technology or understanding that we have. So you could go, okay, the jinn, you know, and fairies and whatever, and then it becomes, you know, aliens and all the rest of it. And there's obviously something that we're picking up that exists out there, but we interpret it in a particular way. And obviously for Stuart, he was doing the ghoulish thing. But I mean, if he'd been brought up as a Sufi, he might have been the jinn. You know what I mean?
Yeah. I think a lot of the stuff that changed with Stuart as well, it's like, and it happened. It changed spirituality, New Age, everyone's circle, or all of that kind of circle. Was the Matrix? Like, I mean, he obviously bangs on about the Matrix. I've seen it, whatever he says, 45 times, whatever the figure is. But he does change after that. But so many people change after that. So like there's a huge change, and I think in a very mostly negative way, because it allows for a disassociation between yourself and life. In that my real life is somewhere else. You know what I mean? And it's very close to it's the same thing with a different rapper about Christianity. Doesn't really matter what happens here. My reward's in heaven, my real life's in heaven, my real thing's here. Doesn't matter about any of this. Let the whole world burn because I'll just get unplugged from the Matrix. It's only a simulation or whatever. But also with the Matrix stuff is you have the good guy, bad guy, that thing, you know, where it is very much the Crusader versus the, you know, and I would say he was fairly influenced by Star Wars as well at one point, given the fact that his book is called The Force. And so that it does seem to be something that he has been playing around with for a long while, the evil side, the dark side, and then seeing himself, I suppose, as the hero and having to win the battle or something. But yeah, the Matrix is probably, what's the Matrix, 1999, so that's like, yeah, as much as I like the film, it definitely it wasn't great for spiritual circles.
No, and I think the thing is, it's a brilliant metaphor. But again, you have to sort of think of the metaphor that it is actually really not to do with computers. You know what I mean? It just, if we could just change that metaphor and think, well, it is like a spider's web. Because again, if you think about it, there are belief systems that operate in the idea that things are to do with spiders' webs. You know, whether that's a sort of Norse thing of you've got somebody weaving something, or you've got some, you know, Indian, you know,
Indra's net and all that kind of stuff.
or a spider that spins, you know, life. There's an African thing, I think, isn't there, about a spider that creates the world.
Like and you think antibodies things, the Neil Gaiman stuff. That's just
Neil Gaiman does. Yeah, Neil Gaiman uses that sort of myth, doesn't he? That because there is something naturally occurring as a natural phenomenon. But we've actually got so far now with, you know, so the Matrix could work as a sort of, you know, because the idea is that a web will transmit messages because that's how a spider knows that something's landed on it.
Indeed, yeah.
You know, but as soon as we get in now, we're so deeply involved in the technology that it's really, like you're saying, it messes up our ideas of where we are, and you know, we've lost that thing that was saying about the sort of Chinese thing right at the beginning, just what you Chung Fu or whatever. Yeah. But the Chinese thing is certainly the Taoist thing is definitely about the marriage of heaven and earth, and that you need to be grounded because you can't do anything unless you are grounded. If you've got to have your feet on the floor and drawing the energy from the earth. That is the Taoist, you know, Tai Chi, whatever thing, right? But I don't see an awful lot of that.
No, and there's so much. It's so prevalent of the whole thing that everything is an illusion, everything is a dream. It all exists in consciousness, so it's not real. And that's for me. And I'm very much open to be experience something different. It seems to me that's an awful lot of escapism, not wanting to actually deal with your life. You know, that it's like, no, it's like, oh, it doesn't matter because the earth or the world isn't real. And like, from my point, I think it's probably more real than anything else. You know, it's the that's the one thing that people get kind of say about, like, say, Wicca or witchcraft, or mostly Wicca, or the you know, the kind of brush it aside. But at least they're earth based. They're all about the earth. It's all about the reality, touching trees, touching the earth. You know, the actual tactile nature of earth, rather than an airy fairy escapism. I'm not saying everyone's into
No, but
non-duality.
I know what you're saying.
Yeah.
The problem is that we don't do the two. We don't do the heaven and the earth, right? We're not very good at that. And again, it's like sort of like what's, you know, it's whatever creative part of your brain. I still talk left side, right side brain, because it's just a great metaphor to use. But that sort of thing where you've got the dreamy part, but then you also have to have the logical, you know, the obvious thing that makes it work, you know, the grounded bit. And it is a balancing act. And, you know, it's all very well thinking, oh, you know, this is great because I'll get my rewards in heaven and all the rest of it. But what happens if you don't?
Yeah. You know, you've just completely could have had a life there, but you didn't because you were looking somewhere else. No, I think a good way to kind of describe it in one way is, you know, when you start hearing people, the non-dual people talking about, and the Buddhists, that there's no self, it's just a thing, a series of events that are arising constantly with no, you know, inherent self or whatever thing. And I kind of like, I can understand that, and you can certainly make an argument to make a case that is true. What it feels like to me is that you are going, well, there's these loads of notes and they're happening in a sequence. There's a bit of a rhythm, and then this is all based on music that has come before it, and it's been influenced by that, and it's been influenced by that. So there's nothing really new, and it's coming out. And you go, yeah, but it's also a song, and you're missing the song. You're not hearing the music. You know, you could say that, right, there's no inherent self to the song, but there is. There it is. There it is.
You're absolutely in my ballpark here, because obviously we're both musicians, right? That is a great metaphor, because in actual fact, music, of all the sounds that you could have, we've selected some that appear to go together as far as we're concerned. Now, they probably don't go together as far as a frog is concerned or anything else, right? But to do with us, that's what we think. So there is something that we draw together that then we create with that. So we can then analyze it and go, well, really, it's just a bunch of notes and it's a bunch of this and that. But there is something that sits inside of that makes it a song, that makes it a melody, that makes it change you as you listen to it, that makes you feel good or bad, angry, happy or sad. And you think, well, that's really weird because it's just a bunch of noises.
Yeah.
All right?
It's really weird. It's so weird.
Weird. So the point is, you can say, yeah, you know, consciousness is this thing that, you know, rises naturally, and it's this, and it just happens to be blah, blah, blah. But that's like, say, well, it's just a load of notes.
Yeah, exactly, yes. Yeah.
Because otherwise, where's the magic in life if we don't start looking for something and go, this means something to me. It speaks to me. And it speaks to me in a way that it moves me and changes me. And I think that's the thing about life. And, you know, when you get that, as you say, like the sort of Buddhist thing, and I get a lot of that, totally. And in many cases, it's great to think like that when it's appropriate. Yeah. And then sometimes you have to go, oh, no, it's definitely, we've got to just get our feet on the ground, make sense of what we're doing and all the rest of it. And I think that's the thing, it's this dichotomy all the time about stuff, you know? So I really get that. And I really get that because we are in a very dangerous place because we've got so much nihilism within society.
Yeah.
And that is not a good thing. And the reason I think that's showing up as being such a dangerous thing is because the amount of the sort of canaries in the coal mine, if you like, the old people and the young people who are suffering from very strange conditions, you know, depression and whatever, that should not really be happening. The amounts of Alzheimer's and, you know, all sorts of stuff that are going on. There is something not right. There's something where people seem to have they're without a rudder. And whether that rudder is, there is a real direction or not is almost irrelevant. It's like we have to have one.
Yeah,
We have
yeah.
to have a map, even if the map is not.
The thing you're looking for there is it's capitalism. It's just and even it's almost like, I don't know, I was watching a thing earlier on TikTok about not watching TikTok, the usual things, and I was just thinking about how we've been engineered to our focus has to be so quick. We're engineered to get that endorphin rush or the dopamine hit, whatever it is, and that's another thing that's pulling us into this illusionary, not real, where we're seeing the world as not real. And of course, his final point was that what you need to do is get out and touch the ground, go to a forest, focus on what you're into, your passion, your creativity, the magic, rather than the directionality being in all the time, which is so much spirituality, so much technology, so much modern life is all going inwards. It's magic is outwards. The directionality is outward. Creativity is outwards. That's expansive. It's novelty. It's widening, and it's not a return. It's the difference between being mystical, having a mystical approach, and having a magic approach. The directionality is different. Both of them are valid, and the object is the balance. But there's a very distinct lack of magic, even in magicians at the minute, because they're all mystics.
I totally get that, because there's the thing about, again, this thing that we want to have a formula, right? Which is one of the problems that we have, is like we need the recipe to do the magical thing. But in actual fact, some of the better magical events, like even, any art is like this as well, where you just sit down and do something and it just happens, and you think, I don't even know why that is so good, right? Or it's this sort of thing where you very quickly intend for something, and use just whatever stuff is around. If you need some sort of props, in fact, you might not even need any, and then suddenly it just happens, and you go like, okay, I didn't do anything by the book.
Yeah.
Right?
I just have a sudden thought about something, completely forget it, and then the next day, there it is, right there.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, literally as straightforward as that. And I think this was one of the things, going back to bring it back to sort of Stuart's stuff. The fact he wasn't talking about magic, but it obviously we'd recognise it as that. And interestingly, that he didn't push that, and it may have been that wasn't the zeitgeist at the time that you spoke about that sort of stuff. Because it was slightly scienced up, maybe, because it was new age science. If you get my maybe that was part of it. But obviously, anything where you were contacting people as a medium, which is obviously part of where Stuart was coming from, that wasn't in the zeitgeist either, really, at that time. Became more so later, I guess, But anyway, I'm just thinking. So, what would you say for people who want to pick up a Stuart Wilde book? What would your recommendation be?
I would say,
Look. So this is amazing.
Into itself. I think it's probably the best first book on Stuart if you're reading them now, because there's some dated language and dated ideas in some of his early stuff that I think would put people off. Where if you come in infinite self and then go back, that you might be able to be more have it in context. Not making allowances for it or not kind of excusing it in any way, but like there is definitely. But it's 40 years old, those books, at least at this point. The Miracles is anyway. So 1982, 83, is it Miracles?
Yeah, probably. I don't know. I can't. My idea of dates and stuff is so terrible.
Yeah. This one here, the developing your sixth sense, is that's the most recent one. That's based on an audio book, and it's some of that stuff is coming directly from that mediumship stuff that he did, and all that old Chinese and all that kind of stuff. And
so who published that?
That is G&D Media. whoever they are. Oh, G&D Media. I know that the other one that came out recently, the Journey Beyond Enlightenment, is Nightingale Conant, because they own the audiobook of that anyway. So yeah, and the James Wilde has an awful lot of Stuart Wilde stuff, the audio stuff. You know that the Australian guy, not related, has all the subliminal tapes, which are great. Even if you think they're hokey and don't work, the actual music is lovely and very relaxing, and I put the Joy one on all the time, and it makes me feel joyous. It might just be the music rather than the affirmations underneath. But there's a lot of newer stuff has come out over the last while. They used to only be able to get a lot of this stuff in tapes, and then they could work kind of a couple of CDs. But there's a great resource there. Like, I mean, they're not cheap either, though. Like, but they're not overly expensive. But some of the stuff, like, he has the entire Redeemer's course you can get, but it's like 500 or 600 quid or something, which I'm never paying that for. You know, that's never going to happen. But he has the 5 elements of man. There's a great one where they're actually does the channeling of old Chinese. There's a recording of it. It talks a bit about that era of his life, which he's never mentioned in his book. He completely has avoided any of that stuff. He only ever mentions it as he had a master, a teacher, and he had to, you know, drop everything every time there was a meeting called, and eventually there was only 3 of them. You know that story I did that if you turned up and you were a minute late, you weren't allowed into the group anymore, and you might have traveled to the far, you know, winds of Russia to get to this meeting. So, yeah, he's much better to listen to than to read, and his books are great. That's not to say his books aren't good, but you get more of a flavour of him through his lectures than. And I would, you know, go early rather than late. Some of his later books I would probably even avoid altogether, to be honest. Like the from God's Gladiators on, you're into
some people like that a lot, but I mean, yeah, it's complicated, I think, to get your head around. My suggestion would be one of the, you can obviously find these on YouTube. I think it's to do with the trick to money talks.
Yeah,
that he used to do. So he's much younger, in a suit,
in a grey suit.
Yeah, not disheveled in shape or form. Obviously doing a talk in America because he's talking about faucets instead of taps.
He looks like Phil Dunn.
And he's absolutely hilariously funny. As well as
not on YouTube anymore. There's a clip from it, but it's because James Wilde has it on sale. So he obviously
right. Okay, so that's what's going on with that then. But as I say, that we mentioned this earlier, there was a couple of people who got a little bit upset when I did a couple of interviews about Stuart a couple of years ago. But so there is obviously something going on.
Yeah.
But it'd be nice to sort of see more made of him within the sort of magical community, I think.
Yeah, I think so. I think his son has taken over the website now and is doing some. There was an app at one stage, but it's not there now anymore. But there's hopefully his legacy isn't going to completely disappear. Like, cause it would be a pity. There's like way worse people who are absolutely praised and honoured, you know, and held in such high regard, and that you know, than poor old Stu. But he's certainly a brilliant character. Great lessons to learn even from his life. A great lesson in not listening to his own advice. Early Stu would not be happy with old Stu.
But he would actually say that.
Yeah, and no, but yeah, and not taking things too seriously, and also, you know, trying to remove much of the guilt from spirituality as well. It's like, you know, what good is spirituality if you can't hold it down to the bank and get some money out of it? You know, it's exactly. Like this kind of pious, and he always goes on about righteousness. You know, no, listen, really hates righteousness. But he's not going to be everyone's cup of tea. Certainly not. He's gonna really annoy an awful lot of people. So you just have to make your own decision about it, whether he's for you or not. But I wouldn't dismiss it. Like, even if, as I was saying, if you read some of the early books and some of his ideas are a bit, you're embedded in you know, 1980s new age territory big time, and all that goes with that. If you can get more into his overall ethos, I think it's certainly worth everyone's time. I think it's a lot of great things to say.
Brilliant stuff. All right then, Tommie. Thank you for your time.
All right, man.
That was lovely chatting to you. And yeah, best of luck with what you're doing. And need to give you your podcasts and stuff a plug there. So
yeah, if people go to www.adventuresinwoowoo.com, yeah, all my stuff's there. But if you literally type my name into any social media, you'll find me as well. It's Tommie spelled with an IE, Tommie Kelly. I'm everywhere. You can't. It's hard not to find me. Really.
and
So.
you've got a new deck coming out, haven't you?
I do. It's just released. It's based on the Buddhist teachings of the Nidanas, which is codependent arising, or why is all this happening, and what can we do about it? So that it's based on that, and yeah, I've always stuff coming out. I'm a constant stream of trying to do more stuff and selling it to people. So
yeah, brilliant stuff. Excellent. Well, all the best with that, mate.
thanks, man.
Lovely chatting to you.